Howlodina, Ted Hernandez, the tribal chair for the Wiyot tribe, as well as the cultural director and ceremonial leader for the tribe. I have Michelle Vassel, our tribal administrator, here with us. And it's an honor for us to be here today to talk about the return of Tuluwat with everybody. I know everybody's been waiting to hear our story for a while. So, we've been out telling the story and hoping that other people can get their lands returned to them. But like we do in the beginning, can we maybe, if you like, introduce yourself so we know who we all are at the same time?
Sure. Do you want to pick people, Ted?
I'll have Michelle pick.
Okay.
So why don't we start with Coyote, and then Coyote, if you could pass to the next person, someone who hasn't introduced themselves.
All right, sounds good. Hi, I'm Coyote, they, them. I'm the executive director of Independent California Institute, pro-California independence think tank. And I actually happen to be up by Humboldt Bay right now on vacation. So I'm especially excited to learn about people in the land that I'm in. And I'm gonna pass on to Marcus Ruiz Evans.
Thank you, Coyote. Thank you, John, for letting me be here. Marcus Ruiz Evans, thank you.
Why don't we start with Karen next?
Hi, I'm Karen Alvis, and I originally was invited to this group about 6 months ago by Julina Acosta. I live in Windsor, California, and we started a group called Community Healing around some hate that was being generated in our community over Lytton Rancheria buying land to build a subdivision. And so our group is trying to inform our community about Native Americans and their right to return to their land. And so everything I can go to learn more about your struggle, well, that's why I'm here.
Thanks so much, Karen.
Thank you for having this platform.
Kelsey? Kelsey, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hello.
There you are.
Hi, sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm Kelsey. I work for the 29 Palms Band of Mission Indians. I'm out here in the Mojave Desert. I went to Humboldt State, and so I'm honored to be here to listen to your story today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I think Robert is from your neck of the woods too. Robert, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good. We're in the afternoon now. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name is Robert Presiclaus. I'm the new executive director for the Native American Land Conservancy, and we work closely with 29 Palms.
Awesome. It's an honor to have you. I just got your email. I'll respond shortly. Tina.
Yes, mi hija nahinka netwanya netina komika betna ha tongbe koi mix kanakan koi yo eme awish kaneha kwe avomanet the hobetamet. Hello, my relatives. I am Tina Orduno Calderon, Gabrielino Tongva, Ventureño Chumesh, and Yoeme, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. A few things that I am part of is I am the treasurer for the Ahachiman Tongva Land Conservancy. I am a board member of the El Sereno Land Trust, member of the United Descendants of Pavona Council. I'm a culture keeper, storyteller, singer, songwriter, and poet, and I'm on the Tongva Language Committee, as well as I am on the Parent Advisory Council for the Fernandeño Tatavian Band of Mission Indians. And the last newest thing is Advisory Council for the Tongva Springs at our village of Curabanga. So really looking forward to hearing to this talk. Thank you.
And she's too modest to tell you that she's the mother of a world famous voiceover actor from City of Ghosts. If you haven't seen that on Netflix, it's incredible. There's a really cool indigenous cartoon about Tongva land. Highly recommended. And I don't know if you know Kelsey and Robert, Tina, but we should definitely all three talk because you guys are neighbors and doing very much the same work. Thank you all for introducing yourself. Thank you so much, Ted and Michelle, for being here. It's a real honor to be able to provide this platform to you. And we'll let you begin your presentation now. There's a poll that's open. If you haven't taken it, please do. And feel free to send me your response to the other in email. Without further ado, Ted and Michelle.
Well, thank you. It's nice to meet everybody, and I'm gonna have to check out that show on Netflix. So
I'll put it in the chat.
That would be great because my daughter is also a filmmaker. So and she created a film regarding the boarding schools. So I will have to check it out and share it with her. So I'm gonna let Michelle start off with our slides, and if you have questions, feel free to ask us because we want everybody to be able to get their land returned to them, and why reinvent the wheel when it's already there?
Please ask your questions in chat, and I will communicate them just to make it easier. Thank you all.
Sounds good.
So I guess I'll go ahead and start.
Yeah.
You want to do like an opening or anything?
So, as many people know, I'm not really Michelle knows I'm not really a good public speaker. I go out there when she tells me to go out there, so she's like my boss that keeps me inclined. But we're here to talk about the return to Tuluwat and the process it took for us to get there, and because it just didn't happen overnight. Tuluwat was something that has started since the massacre, and that's when it was taken from us. It was I'll start with the stories that we were doing our ceremonies in February of 1860, and we're doing our.
We're gonna go out of order.
Oh, okay, never mind. That's why I have her here to help me do this.
No,
This is Michelle's created this wonderful slide to tell us on how this process started, and I'm gonna let Michelle go from here, and I'll maybe jump in once in a while on this.
So I was going to start with Wiyot territory because I know everybody's from other places in California, but Wiyot territory is in Northern California, and by Northern California I mean about 6 hours north of San Francisco. Many people think San Francisco is Northern California, but we're way more north than that. We're North California. The Wiyot traditional lands are on and around Humboldt Bay. You want to talk a little bit about the Aboriginal territory?
So our territory is a vast, it's over 1,000 square miles. So our territory starts in the south to Bear Mountain Ridge, to the southeast to Chalk Mountain, south and northeast to Berry Summit, and then up to the north to Little River, and then to the west to the Pacific Ocean as far as we can see. So that is our ancestral territory, and it calculates about over 1,000 square miles.
And it's basically on and around Humboldt Bay, and just inland and just south. But people traditionally lived all around Humboldt Bay. Ted was just talking about Tuluwat. Tuluwat is an island in the center of Humboldt Bay. It is the one that you see that doesn't have any boats attached to it here. The one with the boats is called Woodley Island. It's a neighboring island. So traditionally, Wiyot people before contact with European people lived in this place, and Wiyot people lived peacefully with other neighboring tribes. They traded, they fished, gathered, mostly marine life, hunted, and also something that's not known or well known is that Wiyot people farmed. Any place that there's a Wiyot village in our area, you find a corresponding traditional garden that is made up of local edible foods, but all those foods were usually found really close to a village site. So first contact for Wiyot people was originally some fur traders, but the I think the biggest impact on Wiyot people was the gold rush. And with the gold rush came, genocide and just mass change in this community. It began, I think that in other places in the United States, contact with Europeans came in a different way. We've all heard the stories about people that are fleeing their home countries, trying to set up new lives for themselves. The people that came to this area with the gold rush were greedy people that were looking for gold. And then there were also additionally people that came with them that were looking to, be greedy and extract from the gold miners. So there was this time period in California history that for Wiyot people was absolutely devastating. You want to talk about the massacre?
So as Michelle was saying, people, we had the early settlers come in, and our areas was so abundant with natural resources. We had the timber industry, we had the fish industry, we had the gold, and everything that the Creator provided with us was here. And like Michelle said, the Wiyot people were peaceful people, and we were a ceremony people. We always did our ceremonies to bring healing to the world, and which we call our world renewal ceremony. And that is to bring balance into this world and bring, better crop harvest for us and better seasons for us, as well as not just for the Wiyot people, but for our surrounding tribes that surround us. So we were in February of 1860, we're in the stage of doing our ceremony, the world renewal ceremony. And this ceremony is held during the daytime, and usually our other ceremonies are held in the evening. But this ceremony in particular is held during the daytime. So we had completed the ceremony. And remember, our ceremonies go for 10 days. So this is just one of the days that the ceremony was in, and we're done. And so our young men went out to gather supplies for the next day. And while they were away, the elders and the women and children took care of the camp, and they fell asleep. During that night, while they were sleeping, a group of men came across in boats to the island. And they didn't bring guns. They didn't bring nothing that can make a sound. They brought hatchets, clubs, and knives. And they had an intention to come in and pretty much massacre the entire tribe. When they got there, everybody was asleep. There was no but young men around. And they basically started clubbing, hatching, stabbing these our people that were asleep. And some of our people did get away. Some of our people, we are strong, resilient people. I mean, especially Wiyot women, they are strong, because I've heard stories where they swam across the bay, and Humboldt Bay, it's a cold water, and they swam across that bay with stab wounds in their side, carrying their babies across the bay just to survive. And there was other stories where elders or other people hid underneath bodies to keep themselves alive. But these people came over to one reason, and they wanted to take what was not theirs. They wanted the gold, they wanted the timber industry, they wanted everything. And they knew they had to get rid of the Wiyots because it was in our territory and we were a big nation. And they said, well, we're just going to do it this way without asking or doing treaties. We're just going to take it from them. And the only way we can take it from them is by eliminating them and exterminating them. And so that's what they did that night. And that just Tulop wasn't the only massacre. We had 5 other separate massacres that happened during that week, of course, in Wiyot territory.
And they were all similar.
And they were similar, like Michelle says, they were all similar. So
Snuck into a village site during the night when everyone was sleeping and literally murdered everyone they came in contact with.
Exactly. And so the Wiyot people, if you asked us to stay, if you asked us permission to stay in our village, we would allow you to stay with our village. We would teach you the ways, we would show you the ways. Our elders always said, if somebody comes into your village or your home, you bring them in to feed them, you bring them in a place to rest their head. And if they're sick, you bring them in to heal them. And when they're better and they're ready to go on their way, but if they wish to stay, then allow them to stay. And then they become part of you. These people didn't want to do that. They just wanted to take, and they knew that we were a peaceful people, because there were tribes that our neighboring tribes, some of them were not as peaceful as us, so they took us out first. And then when the massacre, after the massacre, the people of Eureka woke up the next morning and they saw that the bay was red with blood. And that's when you hear the stories that the day their bay ran red.
So the Indian Island massacre is a famous massacre because that morning, there happened to be a reporter from San Francisco that was staying in our area and just happened to be here at the moment when people woke up. The people of Eureka woke up, looked out into the bay, and the bay was red with blood. And he reported on it, and he was later run out of town. His name was Bret Hart, and he was literally run out of town for reporting on it. But his report went to the San Francisco Chronicle, and then branched out as newspaper headlines do across the country. Eureka at that time got a name called Murderville. They were the name on the headlines was Murderville for this horrific act that happened in the middle of Humboldt Bay in 1860. So after the massacre and the series of massacres that were, mostly not reported in our area, the federal government decided for the protection, I'm going to put quotation marks here, for the protection of Wiyot people, that they would protect them by involuntarily removing them from the area. So for a number of years after the massacre began the relocation efforts, which involved basically rounding up any Wiyot people that were found and being taken to Humboldt, Fort Humboldt. You want to talk a little bit about
they took them to Fort Humboldt and they rounded them up in a corral. So if you can imagine going in and seeing a cattle corral, that's what it looked like. There was no shelter covering the people. They were so crowded in bunches that the diseases came in, people got sick. There was no proper bathrooms for them. It was basically like it's a corral for cattle, and that's where they kept them. They also transported people to our neighboring sister tribes up in Tolowa and Hoopa and Yurok, and also all the way down to Round Valley. So
I have listed in front of you, because for those of you that are out of the area, you might not understand how far away these places are, but here's Eureka in the middle there. And the first relocation was to Hoopa, which is about an hour and 45 minutes by car.
By car.
And then the next relocation was up to Smith River, which is another hour and 45 minutes north of here, just straight north. And then the next relocation was down to Covelo. And if you look at the distance from Smith River to Covelo, the distance from Eureka to Covelo is like 3 hours by car.
Yeah.
Imagine what it was like then. I don't know, how long it took to go by foot, but that is a long distance. And if you can imagine going up from Smith River to Covelo, that's even longer. I know a lot of people don't know the history of relocation in California, but it was common along with.
It was very common along, but a lot of things with the Wiyots would do it too as well, is that so that they get caught and had to relocate, they would change their identity. They would become somebody else. They would say they were either Portuguese, or they would say they were Hispanic descent, or they would claim a different race so that they didn't have to get to these camps. Or they found families that took them in and they became indentured servants and became slaves, or indentured servants, or however you want to look at it, just so that they didn't get transported to these camps.
And then a lot of people returned regardless of wherever they were relocated to. They kept returning home. So over time, no matter what happened, Wiyot people continued to return home. And even today, Wiyot people continue to return home. So after the massacre and relocation, Wiyot people continued to, quietly rebuild, and in 1908, with private money, purchased what we call today the old Table Bluff Reservation. Yep. It is currently located just down the road from our current reservation. But I think that the thing that's really for me, something that's not well taught in school, the Wiyot people never ceded their territory. Other tribes have treaties in which they ceded their territory in exchange for something else. Sometimes these treaties were unscrupulous. A lot of times the things they traded for were not fair, and often those things never happen. But in this case, for Wiyot people, there is no treaty with the United States government, and the land that we call the Old Table Bluff Reservation was not land that was reserved for Wiyot people by the federal government. It was actually purchased with private money for Wiyot people to live in and maintain their government and status as a people. And despite that, and going along with the policy of the United States at that time period, I jumped ahead of myself. But despite that, the federal government terminated Wiyot people and basically no longer federally recognized them, and divvied up the old reservation into individual land allotments, which greatly reduced the overall land base of the tribe. And the tribe was not able to be federally recognized for some years, until some of the tribe's citizens sued the federal government and won a lawsuit restoring their federal recognition as the Wiyot tribe. And that, I forget what year that was.
We won that lawsuit, if I remember right, was in 1986. Was the lawsuit was won, and that was because of the family, Albert James and his wife Beverly James, and their children, their grandchildren, proceeded with that lawsuit, and that's how we were able to be reinstated as a Wiyot tribe. It was because our elders fought to get us back to where we were, and that's why I always say it's always important to take care of our elders, because they hold our stories and our traditions, and they know the history of our people. So it's always good to take care of them.
So in another lawsuit that involved drinking water, if you notice, can you guys see my cursor? Okay, so ignore this right here. This is a Google error. They have Table Bluff Rancheria, which we're not a rancheria, but they have this listed. This is actually a tree farm up here. It's erroneously listed and really messes with people all the time. But this is our current reservation, known as the new Table Bluff Reservation, and extends 88 acres just up into the bay. Our old reservation is actually located down here, and this is on top of a big bluff. You can't really see the raisedness of the bluff via this map, but it's up off the ocean on a bluff that overlooks both the bay and the ocean. So if you can imagine, this is a rising bluff. People with septic systems higher up on the bluff contaminated the water. This is down low on the bluff, almost at ocean level. So this water was deemed basically unfit for human habitation. The water could not be made into drinking water due to pollution by septic systems up the underground river that flows downhill. So as a result of that lawsuit, the tribe was able to purchase this 88 acres up on the new Table Bluff Reservation, and that happened in, I think, 1998.
89. That happened because that I believe was in 1989. Because in 1990 is when the new housing projects began for the people from the old reservation to move up to the new reservation.
And so this is our current reservation here. It's we have houses, about 40 houses here on this reservation, and people still continue to live on the old Table Bluff Reservation. It's a mixture of individual allotments that are owned by both Wiyot people and non-Indian people. So I wanted to talk a minute about Albert James. Albert James is a former tribal chairman for the Wiyot tribe. And in the 1970s, he was the first to reach out to the city of Eureka and ask for Tuluwat back. You want to tell them a little bit about the Tuluwat and what it, like the significance of the place to Wiyot people?
So Tuluwat is what we call Indian Island. It was, you know, I want to make sure we understand. So Tuluwat wasn't the only village on the island. There's also another village, and but the WEAT Council and the elders that came together to finally give the name, our island a name, which is Tuluwat. So we know where we come from. And the reason why we say it is because it's part of our creation story. It is where the WEAT people became WEAT people. It is where, you know, our life began. And it is it's in a most fascinating spot to where it is because it's in the middle of the Humboldt Bay. But if you look at it, Humboldt Bay is connected to our 4 rivers. You have the Bottlewat, you have the Elk, you have the Eel, you have the Little River, and they all connected. So that, you know, you look at Tuluwat as a heartbeat of the WEAT people, and the waterways is our veins, and that was our way to get to other spots and areas. And you know, it's a big part of our stories. You know, our creation story is right there. It talks about, you know, how Condor and his wife ended up on Tuluwat. They had children, which they became WEAT people. The animals that were there taught the WEAT people how to take care of the land, how to nourish the land, how to do ceremonies. So we learned everything from our ceremonies down on Tuluwat, and we were able to take it along the WEAT territory. So that's why, you know, Tuluwat is so important to us, and that's why we do our high dance, which is a world we know ceremony, there on Tuluwat, because it's our birthplace.
So in the 1970s, Albert James had a dream, and he imagined that the WEAT people would dance again on the island. He also imagined, I'm going to just quote out of this article from the Times Standard in the 70s, "I can see my people's children running along the beach on Indian Island. Their laughter is in the air. As I gazed up at the bay, I could see 2 dugout canoes coming towards the island." So this was in the 1970s. At the time, the tribe was terminated, but you know, regardless of federal recognition, the tribe didn't cease to exist. It continued. And Albert James and a group of local people called Far West Indian Historical Center, which was basically founded out of a lot of tribes that were which were terminated in the area at the time. There were members from a bunch of different tribes, but Albert James had gone to the city of Eureka at that time and asked for the city-owned portion of the island to be returned. Imagine that at that time, the people of Eureka weren't ready for the return, and his attempts were unsuccessful. But the real attempts to try to regain the island came back at that time. From 1860 until, you know, we purchased land, no WEAT people were legally allowed to be on the island, and this place is considered this, you know, very culturally significant place. Not, you know, where the people come from, originate from, and is part of all the stories, but also is a place of religious significance for specific ceremonies that are held to basically keep the entire world in balance.
It is. And like, you know, what I want to recommend by Michelle by the island is, you know, we've had data done on our midden, our shell midden, and our shell midden has been dated back to almost 6,000 years. So that can tell you how long the WEAT people have been there. And we've been, you know, but now we see, you know, we've always say we've been there since time more, but 6,000 years is a long time for us to be there, and not to be able to step foot on our land, our home, our ceremonial grounds, you know, by people telling us, no, you can't step there, you're not allowed there no more, we own this now. But like Michelle said earlier, we never gave up our lands. We never gave the rights to give up our lands. This is still WEAT territory, and we still recognize it as WEAT territory until otherwise. You know, we never give up our rights to our waters or our land.
So skip forward into the early 1990s. This is a time when, you know, we had Cheryl Seidner, who was our chairwoman at that time. At the time, I was a college student at Humboldt State University, and she actually scooped me up into working on the island back in those days in the 90s. But she and her sister Leona Wilkinson started in the 90s with two other ladies. One was a lady from the Historic Society, and another lady was a lady from a church group. But the four of them started these vigils on the island, and they were actually held not on Indian Island. Indian Island does not have a way that you can get, you have to basically go by boat, and there's no electricity, and there's a lot of issues on getting onto the island. So, and not to mention it was illegal for Wiyot people to be there anyway. So we held these islands or these vigils on Woodley Island, and on the end that overlooks Tuluwa, Indian Island. And these vigils happened every single year. And I really feel like this is the place at these vigils where we started to see change in our community, because this place had kind of been an embarrassment to the people of Eureka. It was something that people didn't really like to talk about. The massacre was horrific. If you've read anything about it, if you do read anything about it, it's horrific. It's pure horror. And it wasn't something people liked to talk about it. People knew about it, but it wasn't something that was taught in schools. It wasn't something that that people liked to talk about in the community. And so these vigils became a place where people who really were horrified by that history came, you know, and it was Wiyot people, but it was also other non-Wiyot people that were indigenous from other places, other local tribes, you know, Humboldt State students that were from other tribes in the area. And then it was just the general public, people of Eureka, people in this community that I don't know, didn't like the history of it and wanted to do something. And so they came to these vigils every year. And it was at that place, at those vigils, quietly by candlelight, that this movement really started to change our community. So during these vigils, and somewhat in the late 90s, it came up that there was a 1.5 acre piece of property on the island that was up for sale. And Cheryl Seidner, who at that time was our tribal chair, came to council and asked our council if we could purchase that piece of property. And I think it was up for $200,000.
Yeah.
So at the, you know, the tribe to this day we're not a gaming tribe. We don't have any form of economic development. We didn't have any money to purchase this piece of land, but the fact that there was a piece that was open and for sale, the tribe decided, the entire council voted yes on it, to go ahead and move forward with the purchase of the island. And that's when all of the work to come up with the money began. and that was you know, a lot of hard work. Cheryl's sister Leona Wilkinson designed the logo. We started a fund called the Wiyot Sacred Site Fund, and for the next number of years we went everywhere, to every event in this community with a table and some t-shirts and some brochures, and you know, we sold t-shirts, sweatshirts, lapel pins, watches. We had cups. We had anything that we could sell. We sold to raise money for the purchase back of the island. And in 1 year's time, we came up with the money and were able to purchase that piece of land. And then that's a whole nother story. Because the island, when we purchased the 1.5 acres, and this isn't actually, you know, the worst picture that we have of the place at that time. But at the time that we purchased this 1.5 acres, it was on this piece of property on the island had been a dry dock boatyard for what, 100 years or 150 years?
About 150 years.
Yeah, 150 years. Anyway, if you can imagine the things that they did in, you know, 100 years ago on boat repair, a lot of those things are not legal today. They use chemicals that, you know, have since been banned, you know, stuff that's like got lead in it, stuff that's, you know, things that kill, all the various things that might grow on your boat. You know, a lot of those things are no longer legal, but there were just giant vats and barrels, rusted barrels of these chemicals laying all about. Some of these buildings were filled with chemicals.
But also, you know, what a lot of people don't know about the history of the island is that back in the early 40s during the war, the Chinese were held there as a concentration camp. You know, they used our own island to hold other people against their will. And people would go along boats just to see the people on the island like they were being showed off. You know, that's how our community was back then. But you know, like Michelle says, with the visual, that's where things started changing and our history started changing, and people wanted to learn the history of the island. And I also want you to look at, you know, this is 1.5 acres of island, and they sold it to us for over $200,000.
And mind you, half of that's in the mudflats.
So
it's not usable for, you know, development. There's no freshwater source. There's no electricity.
you can't use it for much.
And it was literally an environmental disaster site. There was no, at the time of purchase, we purchased it wholeheartedly knowing it was an environmental disaster site. We did the environmental reviews prior to purchase and knew what we were getting into, but the tribe didn't flinch at the cleanup, because this is the center of the Wiyot world. This is not just historic significance, but also religious. This place is
it really
sacred place.
It's our mother. We have to take care of our mother. This is where we come from. This is where our birthplace is. This is our mother.
So the work began. And so you can imagine the work that was done in the, you know, to purchase the island, that just continued. And we continued the work to get the money to clean this place up. And originally the first people from the tribe that were able to go on the island, you couldn't walk across it. It was so littered with debris, and it was, you know, tangled metal and, you know, like these vats of chemicals. There was a section of the island that was held up by marine batteries.
The marine batteries, they put the marine batteries there to create a wall so it would protect the shore and any waters from eroding the land worse than it was.
So this is the vision for the site. Imagine what you just saw, and then this was the vision that was that the tribe put together for what the future would be. What our plan was in the future is to restore the ability to dance on the island and to basically create a place to dance again. And the work to restore the island started with removing. See how I was telling you that the picture didn't really show you how much junk and stuff was on the island. This is a better you know, viewing of that stuff. And you know, I really feel like I was saying earlier about the vigils, is that place for people to come together by candlelight. The early work on the cleanup of the island was done by volunteers, and those volunteers are a lot of the people that came to those vigils every year. They were people that wanted to do change in this community. And so here's a couple of volunteers that are working, trying to remove some of the scrap metal in 2000. This is those batteries, those marine batteries that were shoring up the midden. So the midden, if you don't know what a midden is created, and I know there's middens all across coastal California. A midden is made up of years and years of a people living in a single place for a long period of time. So imagine that Wiyot people lived there for, let's say, 10,000 years. And every day they did things, and those things over time add up in the soil. You know, whether you're you know, growing plants, or whether you're eating things, you have a trash pile. Wiyot people ate a lot of marine food, so it's called a shell midden, and it's made up a lot of shells that people ate
We had
over
most,
time.
yeah, we had mussels, oysters, crab. You know, we, like Michelle says, we ate what was provided to us by Creator. And as time goes, you know, that's what built our midden up, and it made it stronger and more sturdier.
So 4 days prior to the island massacre, the island was actually purchased. I don't know who it was purchased from because it wasn't the Wiyot people, but the island was purchased by a man named Gunther. And Gunther used the island for a long time. He tried to raise cattle on this island in the middle of the bay, and it turned out to be, you know, really hard to do that because there's no fresh water, and also it's tidally influenced. A lot of the island is made up of salt marsh, so when the tides get high, most of the island goes underwater. There's only a few spots on the island that stay above water, and those spots are actually the shell midden that Wiyot people, you know, built up over years. So if you can imagine that this place that is, you know, the Wiyot people come from, that their story says that they, you know, gave birth to them. Also, the island was made up by Wiyot people over time. So this relationship was, you know, deeply connected. But Gunther was annoyed by the tidal influence and the water coming up on the island all the time. So he built these dikes, which were meant to drain the water off of the island so he could raise cattle on the island. And in doing so, the midden on you know, the raised piece of land had begun to erode. And these marine batteries are what were shoring up that section of the island. And these the midden and the marine batteries were on a piece of property that was actually owned. You know, we'd purchased this 1.5 acres, but that section was actually on City of Eureka land. And so we began the work as early as 1998, prior to even owning the land. We started the work on the city-owned portion to help preserve that midden. This is just a picture of the paint shed that was filled with lead paint and amongst other chemicals. But this is like the state that, you know, we found the island in, and part of the process of just removing these chemicals was a big task. This is a picture from 2002 of removing hazardous waste. This is another picture in 2002 of a removal of a diesel engine. You can imagine how the old boatyard used to work. On the first picture I showed, there were railroad tracks going into the bay. And so a ship would pull up and they would hook you know, something up to the ship, and they would pull it up onto the island using this engine. And removing this diesel engine was the engineering feat, to say the least. But it was a lot of work that was done by good people that really came together in our community. Just so you have an idea of like the wonderful nature of the work that was done here. This is a list of some of the people that supported our projects with money, but a lot of people supported our projects with service, and that particular removal of the engine was a lot of people from this area that came together and literally log rolled that off onto a barge. I can't explain to you how difficult that was, but they managed to do it. And it was a very exciting task. And then, you know, people in this community that were really into engines took that engine and rehabilitated it. And it now every year comes up. It's you know, showcased somewhere as part of the auto shows.
Yep.
And tractor shows and train shows and all these different things locally. But that was, we found a reuse for that particular engine. It's got a new life off the island. This is some work by the CCC, who we used to do some erosion control on that midden. These are bags of shells that we actually had donated from a local oyster farmer. So we worked very hard over the years with our neighbors to do some of this work. This is the creosote removal in 2005. And this is the removal of the steel rail into the bay. That was in 2006. This is the shoring up of the we call it the steel pile installation, but it's the shoring up of the midden on the side of the island that was eroding. This is part of that.
Pylons.
This is invasive species removal, which we've spent a lot of time working on and we continue to work on. If you can imagine that I find this part of the story with the invasive species removal is very powerful for me, because there was a plant that was growing on the island. It's called Spartina, and it is a cordgrass. And it's a problem all over Humboldt Bay, all over in our area. It's a problem. And we began the work of removing Spartina, and it's not easily removed. It spreads. If you've ever seen this plant, it has seeds that are just loose and just fly away. And it's really easy to replant itself. And so it was all over the island. And we worked at trying to remove Spartina, and by basically cutting it before it flowered and seeded, and they burned it. We also found some other interesting plants on the island, like star thistle, which doesn't naturally grow in our area, but if you've ever seen it, it's a mean little plant. But we did the hard labor of this work because of the nature of the island. It's really hard to do anything else, but you can't get massive power equipment out on the island, and we didn't want to spray more chemicals on it. So it was a lot of hard labor by volunteers. And basically what we did is remove things when it wasn't, before it flowered. But I find this story very impactful for me because I saw the transformation on the island, and I saw the transformation in Humboldt Bay in general. And when they removed Spartina in the treated areas, they did replace native plants that they were able to gather from a neighboring island. And we did that, like our staff went out there and planted these plants, and they were doing their work. But I was shocked at how removing that invasive species, the indigenous plant life just blew up there. It just grew back.
Yep.
And
no, it took off. It took off. It knew it had to be there. It knew it belongs there, and it just flourished.
Yeah, it was incredible, and it was so beautiful to watch. I can't even describe to someone else how beautiful it was. But with that removal, and this is a picture from 2006, and mind you, this is a process that went over a long period of time. But with the native plant returned all kinds of marine life and also bird life. And my favorite little thing to look at is the little baby crabs that have habitat there. But this is important habitat in the middle of our bay. Additionally, something that's really important to marine life is eelgrass. Eelgrass grows all around the island, and eelgrass really blew up after the work that we did on removing some of these invasive species. But eelgrass is important to marine life habitat in that it is a place where little baby marina animals, grow up. It's like their nursery. If you think of the movie Nemo, and their little sea anemone that they live in, the eelgrass is really important to California marine life for that reason. And eelgrass all across California is dying. But the place right now in California where the most eelgrass is found is in Humboldt Bay, and particularly around this island in which this work was done. And I really think that is a significant piece of the pie, because when we found out, or when we did this work, we found out that by reducing Spartina on the island, we reduced Spartina all around Humboldt Bay, because we didn't know it at the time, but those little seeds were being carried by the wind and by the birds and by whatever,
By the boats,
nets,
everything.
So it was just spreading it. So by reducing it on the island, we reduced it everywhere inadvertently. We didn't even know that was going to happen, but it was a beautiful thing to watch. This is willow tree pounding. That's part of the planting native plants. We removed a lot of buildings that were on the island. Most were dilapidated, but we retained one basically to store equipment into, and we removed graffiti and all kinds of things from it. We had also had, we have had over the years issues with trespassers that live on the island periodically. Some of those trespassers, in this case, it looks like set up a housing situation in one of the abandoned buildings, but a lot of times they're, what do you call them, armchair archaeologists that are digging for artifacts to sell on the black market. This is, an example of a trespasser's boat. This is some of the camps that we incurred, and lots of volunteer camp cleanups. We still do that today.
Yeah.
We literally go out to the island every week and pick up garbage and look for signs of trespassers who are doing digging, and report them if we find it.
Yeah.
This is metal debris. This is another issue that, we have things that wash up onto the shore. And so we try to find those and just remove them from, being a hazard to people and animals. This is removing one of the dilapidated buildings in 2008. This is actually the excavating of the contaminated soil in 2008. So this is nearing. This is the final, by the time we got to this piece of the contaminated soil, we've done most of the cleanup of the island by this point.
Right.
And this soil piece was a big one. And it literally, as you can see there, involves people in hazmat suits scooping with shovels, because this is it's a culturally and religiously significant area, but it's also an archaeologically significant area. And a lot of this work is being done on and around a shell mound. And so we had to be very careful when we were disturbing the soil, that we weren't taking with it people and things that belong to, people who used to be there.
Yeah.
And this is weighing the drums of the contaminated soil. They hand sifted all the soil and made sure that we didn't remove anything.
So as Michelle was saying, is that this took quite some time to get cleaned up. But I think one part that we need to make sure too is that during this time of the cleanup, the city of Eureka saw how much we were doing to our cleanup. They saw how much we were investing into returning the land back to it was. And Cheryl Seidner approached their mayor at the time, I think it was Peter Lavelle, and said, give us our island back. And Peter Lavelle went to his council, and I'm not going to jump, right?
It's all right, I'll flip through the slides.
But he went to his council, and their council agreed to give back the island to us, but there were stipulations to it. And during those stipulations, there was like, you can't build a casino because who would ever think that we're going to build a casino on our sacred lands? But that was a process. The city of Eureka saw us doing the cleanup, and they wanted to be a part of it, and they said, yes, we'll give you back the 40 acres where that 1.5 acres sits. And that happened in 2004.
Yeah, so in 2004, Cheryl Seidner went to the city of Eureka and requested the city-owned piece of land that was adjacent to our 1.5 acres to be returned to the tribe. And unlike Albert James's attempt in the 1970s, And I think, like Ted was saying, as a result of this work that we did together as a community, but also I think the work of those vigils, because, you know, bringing awareness to the island, bringing, you know, community together in that way to literally pray together, I think really changed the hearts of the people in this area. It became something that wasn't like quiet, that nobody talked about and everybody turned their back on and didn't talk about, but something that we openly talked about and something that we openly and actively worked to change. So this is after the soil remediation, we spent years sampling the wells that were set up to monitor, and this was a really like a new technology that we used. It was called Coolox. It was a treatment that we applied to the contaminated soil. So
pretty much what happened was that it got expensive hauling this contaminated soil. It was expensive. So we had to come up with our natural research department had to come up with another way, and they found this new system where they would inject this
Coolox
treatment into the ground, and it would become a seal. It would be like you're sealing the cracks in the walls in your house from anything coming out. So it sealed everything, and then once they had injected this, then they were able to put a new layer of soil on the island. And so that, you know, that saved quite a bit of funds, because it was like I said, it was getting expensive hauling off this contaminated soil, because not only we would ship it out of state. So this soil would go all the way to Utah to get destroyed. There was no facility here in California.
No, I think it was burned.
And burned, yeah, it was. And there's no facility here in California that would do that. So we would have to pay for it to get all the way shipped to Utah. So we had to figure out another way to make this happen.
And so this Coolox treatment, this was a very new technology at the time. This is low tide in September and October 2011. You can see the difference in the first picture I showed. This is a king tide in 2011. You see that the island, the part of the island where the house is, that is the shell midden. That's the part of that the tribe currently owns, that 1.5 acres. So in 2004, as Ted was talking about, halfway through this environmental project, the city of Eureka, and they're the ones that are listed at the top. Look how much, how little gray you have in your hair back then in 2004. So the city of Eureka at that time voted unanimously to return the 40 adjacent acres to the tribe. And that ceremony happened about 6 months later, and the title was transferred to the tribe. It was an amazing day. But, you know, once we recovered that part of the island in 2004, we continued our work, our environmental restoration work, from it went from just our 1.5 acres onto that 48 acre, the 40 adjacent acres, and it included the shell mound restoration, the Spartina removal, and all those things. So we really increased our impact on the island and in our area in general. And I think that work and the completion of that work was an amazing transformation in our area. And at the beginning, I have on the bottom of the slide, this is a story about place-based healing. And I really feel like this particular project, with the physical labor of it and the long-term process of it, and also the work that we did together as a community, we put calls out for volunteers and people came.
Yep.
And when we went out and raised money, you know, there were those of us who went and sat at a table and, you know, gave the speech over and over and over and over again, who anybody to listen. But there's also people who bought those things, those t-shirts, and those people that wore those t-shirts around proudly. All of those people participated in the 2004 land transfer and the work on the island, because they helped us pay for it. But it wasn't just the It wasn't just the tabling. We also were doing art auctions. We did a series of benefit concerts. We
Taco fundraisers.
did Indian taco sales. We did all kinds of stuff. And I like to imagine that it was all of us. It wasn't just the people that put on these events or did worked at the event, but all the people that put their time and energy into coming to the event. If we had a benefit concert and people bought tickets, they were part of this project.
Yep.
If we had musicians, we had top name Native American artists come from all across the country. We had Littlefoot, we had Floyd West Crow show up. We had Kisa-Cola. And we did things like to save money because this was a benefit concert. We're trying to raise money. So we couldn't afford to bring Kisa-Cola and his whole band out. So Kisa-Cola would make a deal with us. And he said, I'll come out. You pay for me to come out because we had to pay for the tickets to get him here. But provide me with people that can back me up. And so, we called upon people in our community to play drums, to play guitar, and those people backed Kisa-Cola up on sale and are on stage. And they are all people that were part of this project. Both Kisa-Cola and, as he calls them, his wild band of Indians. Yeah. Which were literally, people from our community. We had art auctions, and at these art auctions, artists gave us their art. One of our most well-known artists, Rick Bartow, who we're working on a project to honor him right now. He's a world famous artist. I mean, his stuff is in Washington, D.C. and valued at these extremely high prices. He just donated art, just without even
asking. Just here you go.
Here you go. He also is a musician and played at our concert. So those people all contributed, artists, musicians, people who just came, people who ate our tacos, people who donated the flour to make the tacos. So all those people were part of this project. And that is where the community change happened.
It's it. This is where you got the community involvement, and everybody knew where they were, and everybody knew that they were part of the We Got Tribe family, and that's how it just took off. And that's where our story continues. Is that people want to continue to learn about the stories and history of the We Got people because now they feel a part of us and connected to us, and that's our job as the bearers of these lands is to teach them this so that they can move forward as well as we move forward during these times of healing.
So something changed between 2004 and 2019. So Cheryl Steiner, who's pictured in the middle of the top picture, she had retired as our tribal chairwoman for a while, but was back on council in 2016, was it? 2015 or 16. She decided, 15. She asked council if she could go to the city of Eureka and ask for the additional 270 acres that they owned on the island. And it took 4 years of work with the city of Eureka, although they unanimously voted to approve the transfer of the 270 acres. It took 4 years of legal processes to make that happen. And part of the reason that that held that up was not the city of Eureka's heart, because they wanted to do it. It was, we had a local billionaire who was opposing us and threatening to sue them if they transferred the island or the remaining part of the island. He was publicly going on the radio and challenging the city of Eureka, saying he'd buy it at market value, and threatening to sue them because he said his kids wanted to hunt there.
Oh, he wanted to share it with his kids to enjoy.
Yeah. Anyway, so we didn't want to be part of a fight, but we found ourselves there. And the community really came out and rallied on our behalf with us to say no to this person and empower the city of Eureka to make the legal action happen. And so in 2019, the city of Eureka transferred the additional 270 acres. And I must say, they endured a great fight to do so. But all of them up on that stage were up for the challenge and did so in the best of hearts.
It was.
But I think the big difference between 2004 and 2019, that that work that we've been doing over time really broke down the barrier of stereotypes, because there's this big stereotype. I think somebody that introduced themselves earlier was talking a little bit about stereotypes that are around Indian tribes in present day. There's a lot of old stereotypes from that we've picked up in the United States culture over time, but the one that I think sticks out the most today is that tribes are going to get some land and they're going to build a casino. And so that was this thought. The fear was that the tribe was going to get a hold of this land and they were going to build a casino. And so there were all kinds of rules set up on the 2004. There was like the whole title has all these title restrictions on it. We're not allowed to transfer it into trust. It specifically excludes us our ability to transfer it into trust, which doesn't make any sense for the local people, because it excludes federal dollars then from coming into our local community that way for a lot of this work that we're doing. But we accepted that at the time. And it also specifically excludes setting up and operating casino on the island, which
will never happen.
Yeah, to us was like a strange idea that they would even think such a thing. But it just goes to show that fear. Because first of all, the island is in the middle of the bay. It has no electricity. Most of it is underwater for a large part of the moon cycle. And it was just like a silly idea that we would buy this land to put a casino on. But additionally, the place is like it's a historically significant place. It's a religiously significant place. It's an archaeologically significant place. Like the audacity for someone to think that we would put a casino literally on grave sites, or literally on top of what I think other people could understand as a church would be a silly idea. And I've often said, would you put a casino in your church? And then I think, oh, well, some churches do have bingo halls, but we have people who wouldn't do that. So it was like this stereotype, I think, that was really was spelled out in the first transfer. And in 2019, the big significant difference is that there are no title restrictions, and that land was transferred wholly as is, without free and clear, without any title restrictions. So that was an amazing change for our community.
I think like Michelle said, stereotype is that, people nowadays think of Indians as casino Indians, but they really forget the true meanings of the indigenous communities out here. And that is that we are a healing people, we're a spiritual people. And, we never believed in the casinos. It's because of hate to say it this way and just phrase it this way, but it's a white man's thoughts, because they have the casinos and we are just following what you guys made successful. So we're doing it, but we don't put it on our ceremonial lands. We don't put it on our spiritual spots. We know better, but people stereotype us now as big game casinos. Like Michelle said earlier, we're not a big gaming tribe. We don't have gaming. We go by what we have, and that's grants and our typical, what we have from our businesses. And, we do what we do because we know what we're here for, and that's to bring balance into the world. And that's why we need to bring the island back to full health so we can finish what we're supposed to do.
So in 2000, this is a picture from 2011, but in 2015 or 14, the Wiyot tribe was able to complete a ceremony that was interrupted in 1860. The tribe was given a clean bill of health, and the island was deemed inhabitable for people again. And the tribe was able to complete that ceremony. You want to talk a little bit about that?
So I think, by us being able to complete that ceremony was one of the most awesomest days in my life, I can say, because I was on that island for 10 days with the young men preparing for ceremony and talking to our elders that were there with us and telling us the stories. To being able to complete a ceremony that our ancestors could not complete, once we made that happen, we were able to complete that ceremony. We were able to be balanced back into the world, and things, are starting to, I see is falling back into balance. But what I think I enjoyed the most is watching our elders that were able to step foot on the island for the very first time and looking at their faces and their hearts saying, wow, we're here, we're stepping on something that was ours, and we can say it's ours, and we can come back to it whenever we want. And watching them walk the island and just admiring it and just seeing it, that was what was amazing to me. And I knew that day, that's when the ceremony was complete, because the elders brought balance back into the ceremony by doing this.
Will you read this quote from Albert James?
I believe they will dance and sing again. The island was the center of the Indian dance and feast. So we were able to do that. We were able to do that. Albert's dream did come true. And I'm sorry he wasn't able there to see that, but his dream did come true, and we did what he wanted to do. We were able to dance. We were able to run. We were able to sing. We were able to feast.
Read this piece right here.
I don't know my
I'll read it. I can see my people's children running along the beach on the island, on Indian Island. Their laughter's in the air. As I gazed up at the bay, I could see 2 dugout canoes coming towards the island. Describe that day.
So we were able to, that day, we did have the children running the beach, but we also had the 2 dugouts on the beach that day as well. The 2 dugouts that our young men paddled across from Woodley Island all the way to what? They did that. They brought the dugouts to the island.
So I'm having him read this for the first time. I don't think he's ever read this before, but I found this article. But all this stuff happened.
Yeah, no, Albert's vision did come true. It was clear, and it was in a vision, and we were able to make it happen for him and his family. His family was there as well. His granddaughters, his sons, they were all part of the ceremony. They were all there. His nephews, his nieces, everybody was there. So they saw his vision come true. And, it took him to get us to where we were at. And being able to complete that ceremony was one of the most amazing days ever. I mean, I can still remember it. I was able to dance with my son, my daughter. I was able to hold the medicine for the fire. It was just one of the amazingest days ever. And then, the funny part about the ceremony was, in the morning, it was nice and clear. It was nice and sunny. It was the most beautiful day ever. And we were in the process of doing the very last dance. And once we completed that last dance, it started raining. It started pouring. And we had to get everybody off the island, and we did it, safely and everything. And once everybody was off the island, me and the young men and the elder men were sitting in the camp. And we just looked at each other and we just said, it's complete. Creator has given us the blessing by raining and pouring his blessings on us. The ceremony is now complete. And that's how we saw it. And then after everybody was off the island, it became clear and sunny again. So we had the blessing.
So yeah, that was an amazing thing. And I think that it changed our community.
It did. It changed our community. A big set. I felt that there was a lot of pain and relief that was lifted from everybody's hearts, because now everybody is understanding that where they sit is Wiyot land and territory, and they want to be respectful to the Wiyot people, and they want to help the Wiyot people. And like I said, we have a great working relationship with our communities, our surrounding communities, our governments that surround us. I think we have the most better communication than anywhere around, because we all work together and we all know how to make something that works come to it working and work the right way. Our government agencies come to us, they talk to us about, hey, what do you guys think? What do we have people think about this? What if we do it this way? Yeah, that would work, but let's try it this way too. So, we have that interaction, and it's that great government to government, community base that we have. And it's because people know the history now. They know the meaning of the island. They know the meaning of the return of the island, because Tua is just one return of one ceremonial grounds. There's many more to happen, and there's other tribes that are going to get their ceremonial lands back. And like I say, once all of us indigenous communities have our ceremonial grounds back, then the true healing and the true balance of this world can start to happen.
This is actually this picture of Wiyot lands with all Wiyot language names was recently on the cover of the North Coast Journal. And we're slowly working to rename all the places in our community, whether they're places like cities, whether they're rivers. Slowly but surely, we're trying to reintroduce Wiyot words back into our community. And I think a lot of people are finding that that Wiyot names for places are significant because they describe the place. And some of those places, like if you look at the name for Blue Lake, is very so the Wiyot word for Blue Lake is actually means the place where the trails begin. Yep. And if you imagine, that used to be a place where the native trails connected with other tribes, but today they're like a significant their city government actually prides itself on its recreational trail system. So even today, like that name and the use for the place, they're still in sync. The Wiyot name for Eureka, Jurichichi, comes from, it's a place to stop and rest. Yes. And if you've ever driven through Highway 101 North, you probably stopped in Eureka and got some gas, maybe got something to drink. It's still, the place name still works because it's place-based. Do you want to open it up to questions? I think that we have some chats.
Do we have some chats?
We just have a couple of clarification questions in the chat. One of them was the island was used as a prison for people. You said Chinese, but I think you meant Japanese, no?
No, that's actually, it is the Chinese. And so Chinese were brought into our area as laborers during the gold rush. Uh-huh. And then there was some incident that happened. I can't remember the details of the historic event, but this place, I don't want to just pick on Eureka, it was this region, decided to remove all Chinese people from our area after this incident happened. Yep. And then that's when they were put on the island. So this is like a lot of history that's not taught in books, but that's a separate incident from you're probably thinking of Japanese internment camps. This is basically a Chinese internment camp before they were shipped by boat out of our area. And
we did, because at the time there was a lot of the Chinese did interact with the Wiyot people during the time. We
actually have a lot of mixed, and I'm not talking about recent history because there's that too.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of mixed Chinese Wiyot ancestry from back in those gold rush days.
Amazing. There was a couple musicians that you mentioned. I think you said Rick Barta, is that right?
Rick Bartow, Rick Bartow is a famous Wiyot artist, and he's like
a man of many traits. He's woodwork, art, pictures, charcoal drawing, paintings, especially his music, his little band.
We had his band at our benefit concerts, but we also had his art in our art auctions, and the tribe actually went with him to DC, where he has
two totem poles
displayed at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, DC. And he's a really actually well-known artist, separate from being Wiyot. He just is a world-renowned artist. We're just lucky to have him as one of our people.
Yeah, we are. I mean, it was, Rick also was one of the oldest elders that danced at that ceremony for the completion of the ceremony at that time. And just to see him dance and hold the plegak, the headdress, and just watching him just studying and learning and just teaching us what he taught, it was one of the most amazing experiences to have our elder dance with our youth that day.
Oh, you're muted.
When I learned of this story of the return of Tuluwat, I was deeply moved, and I saw it as the beginning of a trend that we're going to see happening all over. And just hearing you tell the story was so incredibly emotional. I saw several people on the call crying, myself included.
I can't help it.
I know. I can't imagine what it would be like to be Wiyot and to experience it, because as a settler, I'm just so pleased. It's such an honor to have you all here on our platform and to hear this story and to amplify these messages and to see it happening more and more frequently all over. That's what we're all about here. I'd like to invite everyone on this call to email ideas and suggestions. I'm going to share the poll that we took about the future roundtables that we'll be hosting. And again, I really want Tina, Robert, and Kelsey to connect because they're doing, the same work right next to each other. And thank you all so much for coming. Any questions we have, please put them in the chat.
I think Matthew Owen has his hand up, so I'm gonna ask him to unmute.
Hello, everyone. I moved from Vietnam country to here, which is on Ohlone territory here in San Jose. Back in the Vietnam territory, they did get their sacred springs back, but they have yet to reclaim all the water. Okay, some of it continues to be stolen by Nestle with the blessings of the US federal government. So they got the land back of their sacred springs, but they don't have all the water. And so your victory hopefully will inspire them to reverse that injustice.
I'm glad.
The specific place I'm standing, speaking of injustices, was the first state capital of the settler colonial state, US settler colonial state of California. And then it was moved from place to place until Sutter convinced them to move it to Sacramento to facilitate the genocide against the people in the goldfields. So after the end of the military occupation, US military occupation, the first state capital was here on this spot where we are reclaiming the land for the Ohlone. Okay, this is Ohlone land. Hence, once again, the battle jack rises to denote the fact that we do not regard this as legitimately part of the US, but rather legitimately part of Ohlone territory. So here we are again.
I'm glad you brought that up, Matthew, because that is an awesome question. That is an awesome statement, because our waters are ceremonial as well, and they are bloodlines. Water is a part of us, and that is, as Native people, we need to take care of our rivers and we need to take care of our waterways, because they are ceremonial spots. That's where our medicine people go to do their medicine. That's where our medicine people go to be by themselves and do their prayers and connect. Our waterways are important to us, and that's why I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to jump into one more item, and that's our rivers. Yes, we were successful at getting our island back. Now we're in another fight, and that's the return of our water. And as you see, as Michelle put up there, that's our Eel River. That's the Wiyot River. That's actually named Wiyot. And
the Wiyot name for the Eel River is Wiyot, and the tribe is so closely connected with the river that the settlers called them Wiyot in error. That wasn't their original names for themselves. but they were so connected with the river that they called them Wiat. This is the river. This is in 2014 when the river dried up, but we are experiencing worse conditions than 2014 in present day. And we have an opportunity right now to remove 2 dams from the Eel River, which PG&E currently owns, but in the FERC relicensing process, PG&E has decided to let their licenses go. And we have an opportunity right now to remove those dams from our river and hopefully return natural flows.
That is so incredible. Such great news. And the dams on the Klamath are scheduled to come down next year too. So that's really, really good. So much exciting stuff happening. Speaking of rivers in the Klamath and the Yurok, they have the Mad River Brewing Company on, and I believe that's on
Wiat land.
Yeah. So how does that work?
That's a different story, a different time. But you know, I don't want to. I have no bad feelings with our cousin tribes. I mean, they've helped us out a lot. They've helped us with our ceremonies. They brought our ceremonies back, and you know, they do recognize that they're on Wiat territory. You know, but that's, you know, that's part of the business world right now. You know, it's like, where are you gonna? What you gotta do is you gotta do. But I do respect my cousin tribes, because if it wasn't for the Yuroks and the Hupas and the Towas and the Karuks, our ceremonies would still be asleep. And they helped us reawake our ceremonies.
If you could imagine the gold rush being like 9/11, Wiat people for the gold rush were in the Twin Towers. And so they were heavily impacted and experienced such a loss in this area. And then the continued settler extractive practices. I'll share another picture with you, because I just think it's, you know, salmon culture runs all throughout the Pacific Northwest. But hold on a second, let me share this picture. I think that the extractive practices weren't just gold mining. It was also extracting fish. Like, they just had practices back then that were just not right. You don't take more than, you know, your share or that you need. And you can see it in the background here. This is like a fish dam, and they're just taking the fish. They can't even reproduce. We just had a fish that was listed endangered on the Eel River. And I was reading an article from like way back in Fortuna. This guy had been busted for, he had accidentally taken 300 pounds, was it?
About that.
Of Chinook from the river. And his legal defense, which was in the paper at the time, was that prove it's a separate species. He said, prove that it's a fish. And his legal defense that he had taken all this salmon was that it wasn't a separate species, and that they couldn't prove it. It wasn't in the book. And so now that same species that was over extracted from the river is now an almost extinct species. And so, you know, that comes full circle, these extractive practices of taking more than you need, and just, you know, seeing the environment as a resource that can be extracted from, and not as a ecological system, is a problem I think we're all experiencing, no matter where we live, with our society, that needs to be changed.
I think, you know, a lot of people don't understand is that the Eel River was one of the largest fisheries that mostly back in the early 1900s, where all the United States got their salmon from. That's how populated it was with salmon. And, you know, stories from our elders where it's that it was so populated, you can walk across their backs to get to the other side of the river.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, even as a child, I remember the ecosystem being very different than it is now. the UROC just had a big success with the redesignation of the spring Chinook as a separate species also, which gave them
that they actually had theirs designated as endangered at the same time as ours, but ours had been on the docket for 4 years, and theirs was added at the last minute. But they're both the same thing. It's the same concept. The fish are dying.
Yep.
If they can't reproduce, you won't have them again.
That's right. And it's a lot more.
We look at once our fish die, then what's next? We fall behind because that's our nutrients, that's our food, that's our medicine.
So this is our river as as it was in, what was this, June?
Yep.
This is the eel in June. So this is the lowest level we've ever seen in June. We have toxic algae blooms happening in June. We can't float a boat on our river. We can't, you can walk across it. And in some places, if you walk across it, you better wash your feet because it's toxic. But there's no fish swimming up our river this year. And it's on target to completely dry up. And at the same time, they're diverting more water from the eel to the Russian to protect, their grapes.
The grapes. Gavin Newsom's grapes, I say.
On that note, thank you again so much for hosting us. We don't have any further questions. We're a little past an hour and a half. Really, I can't say enough how much I'm thankful for you coming on and sharing your story with us. And please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything we can ever do to amplify your messaging, call for volunteers, anything that you need, don't hesitate to ask. And if you have any good relationships with your cousins upriver, I've been trying to get some cultural burning stuff happening from the Karuk. I've been in conversation with Bill Tripp, but he's not big on digital presentations. So anything you can do to help would be much appreciated. Thank you all for joining. And the video of this conference will be hosted on the website and the Return California YouTube channel. And when you hear the police say, "Move back," your response, "Land back."
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a
Thank
good day.
you.
Thank you.